Welcome everybody to another edition of Evo Inspires, and as you know, I'm Jason French, the Managing Director of Evo Australia, and today we're talking to Rob Aldrich, who is a very senior leader who's got approximately 15 to 20 years leadership experience around the globe with some big name companies. And I'm excited to hear his insights into his career and pass that information through to our audience on the exchange. So thanks for joining us, Rob.
Thanks for having me, Jason, and glad to be supporting the Evo Inspire series. It's very cool. Good to be here.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, let's get into it. So the first question we've got for you, Rob, is what's the one piece of career advice you wish someone had given you when you were starting out that you didn't get?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, I wish I'd had that. It took me some time to kind of figure it out, but there's probably 2 points I'd have people consider when they're first starting out in their career. And I think the first is try to find some purpose in your work. Try to find something that you believe in. And I know we hear that a lot. You know, do what you love, follow your heart. It doesn't always pay the bills. So I think it's good to kind of triangulate a line of work where you feel like you won't get bored with it. You will feel challenged by it, and you'll get some reward besides the money out of it. But I think that's more of kind of an emotional track of things. But on the intellectual side, what really helped me out a lot in my career, and I'm at the point now where I'm 20, 30 years in, and I've been able to get up to that chief executive level. It's taken me that long to get there, but what I think has been probably the biggest key to getting there is in my early 20s. I started looking around some of these various organizations I was working for, and I was trying to think, what do I want to be when I grow up professionally? And the way I answered that was I looked at the people in the organization that were very senior and seemed to have the respect of my coworkers and seemed to be living making enough money to live a good and fun lifestyle. And for me, I really looked at these general manager type of roles, and that really seemed to appeal to me because you got to do a little bit of everything. You didn't become like a deep specialist in one thing. You kind of knew, you became a versatilist. You knew more than just the top, 20, 30% down in everything. So I kind of picked that career, or that role, I should say, for my career, and kept that in mind in all of the decisions I've made from then until today. And one of the companies I worked for, Amazon Web Services, they have this as one of their leadership principles. They call it working backwards, envisaging something into the future or envisaging the solution to a problem, and then working backwards to the steps that you have to get there. Because it may take you, in my case, 20, 30 years to get there. So I think if you can envisage the type of role that you want to eventually get to in your career, and you can see yourself being able to enjoy that work, those would be kind of the two biggest things that I would have wished someone had told me early on.
Absolutely brilliant. I wish I got that advice back in the day as well. Absolutely. What about, I guess, one pivotal moment in your career that had a significant impact? Have you got anything that you could sort of share about that?
Yeah, for sure. There's one particular scenario that really stands out. So I got my degree in the mid-90s in environmental sciences, and I made the choice to choose that as my major because it felt right. It felt good. I like the environment. I love camping. I love getting outdoors. And I kind of put the money side of it aside, and yeah. I got out of school and I realized, man, there was really no money in environmental work in North America in the late 90s. So I ended up going into finance for a few years, and I didn't enjoy that type of work. And but through that work, I got to work with some guys in IT. So I jumped into IT, and then I got into this OT world of doing like mechanical, electrical design for data centers, like these very technical tracks. But my heart had always been like, man, I really want to do environmental work. I'd hoped that maybe I would make enough money to pay off my school loans, because in America, you got to mortgage your life to get through college or through uni. And so I told myself one day I'd get back to that. And I kind of kept that in the back of my mind. And then fortuitously, one day when I was working at Cisco Systems in Silicon Valley, an email came out to our whole team, to a group of like 400 of us. And I kid you not, the email literally said, "Do we have any tree huggers on staff?" And tree huggers was said derisively, like,
Of course.
do we have any of those hippie types working for us? And I immediately put my hand up, unabashedly leaned into it. I'm a tree hugger. I got a degree in environmental sciences. What do you need? And that started out as like a senior manager role, but within 2 years, I ended up becoming the first sustainability officer Cisco had ever had. And so that was a real pivotal moment for my career. It allowed me to go back to what my major was, but make a much better paycheck than I would have if I had gone directly into environmental sciences. So I kind of came around. And then in that role, I also, kept going with it and had this pivotal opportunity to really define and optimize how that role was done. And that led to me developing my first product, Cisco EnergyWise. And that product alone had a massive impact on global energy use. Between that work and the work I did at the Green Grid with coming up with PUE and DCIE, these metrics for data centers that help you run them more sustainably. Some estimates, 15 or so years later, say that we've shaved off somewhere between 2.5 to 2.8% of global energy use related to IT, which is a much bigger impact than I ever thought I could have as one in my life. And then that's what I wrote my book about. So to me, that was my most pivotal moment for sure.
But thank you. In terms of challenges and setbacks in your professional life, what's your go-to strategy for overcoming those?
Yeah, I guess, we hit those in our personal and professional life all the time. And one thing that really helps me a lot is perspective. So I'm an American living in Australia, and my father was in the Navy, so I grew up overseas, lived in Saudi Arabia, lived in Puerto Rico, lived in Germany, lived all over the place. And it really gave me a pretty unique perspective of as a white male, honestly, how good I have it in this world, how much privilege I have. And so if I ever feel like I'm having a bad day, I just have to think about those who are having a harder day. And it helps kind of reset me emotionally, and it helps me, get out of my pity pot, as my mom used to say. Stop feeling sorry for myself, and just get up and get after it. And that can be hard some days because you feel like, you're constantly getting rejected, or you're constantly getting, pushback on an idea that will work. And the thing that I just have to remind myself is, some days the best you can do is just figuring out what is the next right thing. And do that, and if you do good today, tomorrow takes care of itself. And so that really helps me keep a positive and constructive attitude in how I approach my work, how I approach the people who work for me, the people I work for, and just feel lucky and thankful that I've got a job, I've got my health, I've got a family that loves me, and what else is there?
What else do you need?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Hopefully that answers the question, Jack.
The other question I had for you was about sustainability and technology. Do you think it has been embraced enough by the big tier companies in Australia, and Australia specifically? Because I do feel like, having worked internationally myself, we tend to lag on a lot of things. We sort of tend to be 3 to 5 years behind Europe and the US in technology transformation projects. We're always behind. Data analysis, cyber security, as an example. I think we're now taking it seriously, and we're investing in data analytics, but Europe and America have been doing that for 10, 20 years, What about sustainability? Do you feel that Australia is taking it seriously enough within the tech space?
Yeah, great question. So I think technology is one vector, but I think your question was really around our companies doing this.
Sorry.
So let's focus on the private sector for a moment. And I've got a lot of experience prior to moving back here in December of 2022 in the US and Europe. So I'm very much across, what the private sector has been doing, and also what the regulatory climates are in both areas. And there's a bit of a one informs the other. Companies are often taking guidance from what regulations are either in place or they think may be coming. So that's kind of the dynamic. And having worked with a lot of very large customers here, I do think Australia is right there with America and Europe from a private sector perspective. Certainly on the emissions and energy efficiency side of things, I think that's right there. And then I think there are some things that I see here that are in fact leading, particularly with the honoring of the indigenous communities here and the recognition of place and land and elders past and present. Like, you don't hear that anywhere else. And for me, when I was in the US, like, one of the things that I would often do if I was traveling through native lands, I would stop by their tribal community center and I would devote some portion of my time because I'm traveling through their land. And usually I'd end up fixing emails or because you show up, say, hey, can I help? They say, what can you do? And I say, I can do carpentry, I can do this, I can do that. And the moment you say IT, they'll be like, hey, man, we've got emails, get in there. But that was, I was the only one I know who ever did anything like that. So to see people here kind of honoring the indigenous communities is good. And I think generally, if you look at the sustainability report of most companies here, they're pretty in depth. They're right there on par with the rest of the world. Regulatory wise, which impacts the private sector, I think probably over the last 3 or 4 years, you could argue that Australia may have been lagging in certain areas, particularly around emissions and natural resource extraction, because such a big part of the economy comes from mining. Yeah. And there's been some pretty high profile issues around, native lands and mining in recent years. But one thing that I don't think enough people have recognized is this legislation that was put in initially under the Abbott government in 2016 called the safeguard mechanisms. That has recently been significantly strengthened by the Albanese government. And there are some new updates to the safeguard mechanisms coming in February of next year. Having read that regulatory framework in depth now a couple of times, I think Australia is jumping the shark. I think Australia now has become perhaps the leading country in the world in terms of putting out legislation that the private sector can follow that is very targeted. And what I mean by that is the safeguard mechanisms have identified, they've done an 80-20 rule. They've identified the 20% of companies and industries that are driving 80% of the country's carbon footprint. And they're focusing their regulations and their efforts there. And they're doing it well in advance so companies have enough time to plan to meet those requirements. So yeah, I'm very proud to be here and be involved in sustainability. But one thing that is perhaps lacking globally is the fact that tech isn't in sustainability as deep as it needs to be. And it's not really from the tech industry. The tech industry can do data all day long. I just came from AWS. You can put anything in the world on the cloud. Most people are on the cloud already. But the way you get energy and emissions data out of your enterprise usually is from these old building management systems or these old oil and gas pipeline systems. They're not optimized for the cloud. In fact, they don't even talk internet protocols in most cases. So when I first took my job as a sustainability lead at Cisco, I did everything out of Excel for the first year. And all the data came back differently, and 2/3 of my budget just went to data prep. Just went to data preparation, converting this data from Excel to CSV, and then pushing out one PDF a year, and that was my whole measurement of everything. Whereas now you've got wireless IoT sensors, you've got the ability to not even use a building management system if you don't want to. You can just measure energy use from the utility bill. You can do water, you can do air quality. There's a million things you can do in IT, but I think sustainability and real estate and transportation teams don't really understand how to pull all that together yet. And that's why I've chosen to focus in this space, because data, if you make something data driven, you're going to get the best results, number one. And number two, it takes some of the politics out of it. It takes the subjectivity out of, hey, don't shoot the messenger. The data is right here. And it's telling us that if we reduce our energy spend, we're also going to reduce our emissions. So green equals green, so that's where I'd see, the state of things today with Australia and how tech can play a big role.